I'm Vicky Shevlin. I started Social Work Sorted 2 years ago. I'll talk a little bit more about me afterwards, but part of what I do with Social Work Sorted is support new social workers coming predominantly into children's services, because that is my background, and it's really, really nice to have you here. I haven't done anything like this live for a while, so yeah, I like doing things via Zoom because it means we can connect a little bit more, and I can kind of get to know you when the other forms of social media feel a bit big for me sometimes. In terms of boundaries for today, I talked about it before when we first came in, but you obviously are free, as you have done, to share where you are up to in your career. So whether you are a student, whether you're a new social worker, whether you're an experienced social worker. I know I've got Sally here, I think, who is very experienced social worker, and is just here to kind of have a look and see what the training is like. But please be mindful of confidentiality. If I ever share any examples in training, they're not identifiable by any kind of name. That's why we don't really share local authorities or universities that we're at. And again, be mindful, like you would in any training, of what you do share. And the other people in the group are social workers, they understand, but once it's out there, it's out there. If there's anything that comes up for you that you feel you want to talk about but you can't share in the group, then you can always message me afterwards. I've talked about the fact that we are recording this training, but you won't be able to be seen in any way, and the chat won't be recorded at all. And we'll have an option for Q&A at the end. I share advice and guidance based on my experience. I am self-employed. I work independently as a social worker. I'm not working with local authorities at the moment. My training is here to support you and guide you, but because this is external to a local authority training, it's not a replacement for your good quality supervision that I hope that you're all having or going to have, and it's not intended to replace your in-house training. But if you find it useful, you can share it with your workforce development teams if there is a gap in something that you're not getting at the moment. So we've arrived, or you've arrived today from whatever you have been doing today. Some of you might have been doing assignments, which you've said. Some of you are already in practice. Some of you are on placement. Some of you might have just rushed in through the door. You might have been doing bedtimes like me. So I just invite you, before we go into a little bit more of a chat, to slow down and take a breath. I'm going to do it too. Just remember that when you're taking in new information, when you are doing something new, when you are doing something for the first time, doing that from a calmer space, when your heart rate is a little bit slower, is going to mean that you take in the most information. It's going to mean that your anxiety is reduced a little bit, so your brain can be switched on to the things that you need to do. So I just invite you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable. Focus all the way down to your toes. And as you're breathing, just bring your focus up your legs, up your body, to your shoulders. You can roll them back and down if that's helpful. Relax your face. You can even, I mean, no one can see you, so you won't look strange, but you can even massage your jaw, which often feels nice because we keep a lot of tension in our jaws. If you want to, you can give yourself a little hug, because sometimes that tactile support can help. And just let go of whatever has happened today that's been playing on your mind, so you can just be in this space for a little while and enjoy some time for you. So I am not going to talk for an entire hour. I hope I'm not anyway. I'm going to talk for a short amount of time, but I think when you are arriving at training, you should know a little bit about the person who is giving you training. So this is a little bit about me, some of my identity markers, no way near all of them. So, you know, I talked about my bedtime routine before. I'm a parent. I'm a wife, a partner, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend. There's lots of parts of my social work identity. There's lots of part of my identity in terms of how I am racialised. I'm racialised as white. I put anti-racist there, but it's probably better described as aspiring anti-racist, because I don't think that's ever a box that can be ticked. And I want to talk about that specifically because the training that I complete is done through my white lens, and as much as I try to give an anti-racist perspective, I am still very much learning in that area. And if there are gaps in my training, if there are areas that you feel I've not covered, areas that you feel that could be made more accessible, then I would like you to tell me about them if you feel that you can, and share that with me, share any recommendations with me. And if you were racialized as white and you are also an anti-racist, which I hope that we all would be in this space, and you're not sure where to start in terms of training, support, reading, just chat to me. I'm not an expert on the topic, but I can let you know some of the things that I've been accessing. And in terms of training, I always recommend that you contact your learning and development team if you haven't already had specific anti-racist training within your local authority. You can ask for it, and there are so many incredible organisations and trainers who will provide that. So I want you to think about why you are here, why you've arrived in this training. What is it about the title of this training? What is it about some of the descriptive words that brought you here? And again, feel free to put that in the chat if, oh, I hope you can see the screen then. Feel free to put that in the chat if you feel comfortable doing that. But taking a bit of time to think, well, what is it that made me join this training? Is it something that I'm feeling? Is it something that I'm hoping to gain? Will mean that you focus in on what you need. You'll get what you need from this training if you understand why you're here. And that's personal to you. It might be because you have got lots of fear. It might be because you're panicking about one specific area. Whatever it is, just try and hold that in mind as we go through some of the points that I'm going to make. Like I said, a lot of you might have seen some of these words and think, yeah, that's what I need some help with that, whether it's fears, expectations, or confidence. And these are the things that I'm going to talk through today. Like I said, it's going to be much more about mindset. These are 3 areas, and I'm going to give you 3 ideas or 3 sort of tangible things that you can go away and work on. We'll probably just scratch the surface today, but that's okay. In terms of dealing with your fears, so many of you, like Donna said in the chat, you know, you are coming up to entering into your ASYE feeling, like Donna said, petrified. You're very scared. You're worried and nervous about things that are going to happen. And all those things, all those feelings are completely normal. We get them before we do anything new. And sometimes they're just more amplified than at other times. In terms of starting from the very beginning, in terms of where you're up to, I would invite you to think very critically about the social work narratives that you are taking in, the social work narratives that are becoming your narratives. And if you work systemically or are going to work systemically in social work, then thinking about the idea of narratives is really important. There is so much out there in terms of, or for new social workers and student social workers, including my own platform. And there are various social work narratives that you will come into contact with. If you're on placement, you'll come into contact with different social work narratives. You know, if you're sat next to the most miserable person in the office because of whatever's happening for them in their personal life and in their professional life, you are going to come away with a horrendous narrative about social work. If you are sat next to somebody who is generally more positive, even though social work is hard, you're going to come away with another narrative about social work. You might be hearing things like, oh, you just wait till you get to your ASYE and then it all falls to pieces, or just wait till you've been qualified this many years. And, you know, it's important for us to balance the challenges that are there. We know they're there with social work, with a mindset as well. And when you are looking for things that will help you in social work, when you are looking for, you know, words, I sometimes search for words that will help and support me. It might be someone's writing, it might be somebody's podcast. Just start being mindful of whether it's helping you or not. I go through those 4 questions that are on the screen when I am taking in information about social work. You know, does it entertain me? Does it uplift me? Sometimes at the end of the day, I need to see a meme that just like gets exactly where I'm coming from and it makes me smile. But that's all I need. I just need that snapshot. I don't need someone to then go down a line of questioning that might make fun of service users, for example. That doesn't entertain me. It doesn't uplift me. It makes me feel uncomfortable. If I'm looking for information about, you know, if I'm looking for reading about social work or listening, I want it to be informative. I want it to help me. I want it to be solution based, so it can, you know, I can make a change based on what I'm taking in. But the main thing I want you to think about is how you feel after you access certain types of media. And remember that you have a choice about what you consume in terms of social work. So if you find yourself on a particular platform scrolling through articles or comments and they are not helping you, if you leave that page feeling miserable or like there is no hope, you have a choice about whether you access it again. And it's probably not going to impact the way that you then practice as a social worker in a positive way if you spent the whole night before reading about how terrible things are. That's not to say we have this toxic positivity of everything's fine. It's just about being mindful of what you consume and how that affects you as well. I do this, like I say, I read a lot about social work because that's the thing that I'm interested in, but I have to be really mindful about the platforms that help me or not. And also be, when I say critically reflective, you know, think about what is designed as clickbait, what is designed to make you click on it and feel miserable, rather than things that are designed for you to click on them and feel positive and hopeful or give you information that you need. My favorite example at the moment is the Social Matters podcast, which I love, which I'm sure some of you have listened to as well. It feels like a bit of a warm hug. I get loads of information, but when I finish listening to the podcast, I feel like I've got really realistic advice. I've got realistic insight, but I also feel good after I've listened to it. I feel like things are positive. I get loads of ideas. So just start being mindful of that, because a lot of your fears might come from things that you have heard rather than things that you've experienced. And we're quite often afraid of things that haven't even happened yet and might not even happen. So it's about, you know, there are things that you'll be scared of that are very tangible that we can manage, but there will be things that are just coming out of thin air, and a lot of that will be influenced by what you consume. The next thing I want to talk about is managing expectations. And I don't know if any of you have read Solve for Happy, which is a book by Mo Gawdat, who also has a podcast. But he talks about happiness, and he came up with this equation of happiness, and it's all about expectations. So, you know, if you expect something and your expectation is exceeded, you are going to be happier. If you expect something and that expectation is not exceeded, you are going to be less happy, or you're going to be unhappy. This happens a lot in social work, so I thought I would give you a bit of an example. If you are starting out in social work and you have an expectation that you are going to get 1 week of induction planned and scheduled for you, if you then enter into your ASYE and you have 2 weeks of induction planned and scheduled for you, that is going to exceed your expectation. So that will be more positive. You'll have a happier outcome. If you enter into your ASYE and you don't have an induction scheduled for you at all, that is going to that is not going to exceed your expectation. So you're going to be unhappier. So it's really important for you to be mindful and really hyper aware of your expectations, because if you don't think about it, if you don't take the time to think, well, actually, what am I expecting here? Am I expecting a caseload of 25 and I'm not going to have 25 on my first day? You shouldn't anyway as an ASYE. That's then going to exceed your expectation. Or am I expecting a caseload of 2 and then by my 4th week I've got a caseload of 10? So if you break down what your expectations are, it means that you can talk about them at your stage of interview. It means you can talk about them before you kind of start your job. It means you can talk about them in your induction. You can talk about that in your supervision. And it's a much more tangible way, rather than if you don't think about it at all, you might get to week 6, week 12, and be miserable and not be able to pinpoint why that is. Whereas if you can pinpoint it, it's a little bit more helpful to then say, okay, well, this is why there's this dissonance between what I thought would happen and what did actually happen. So if you are journaling, if you are making notes right now, then you can write down these questions, or you can kind of think these questions through. What do you think is going to happen across the board in terms of your induction, in terms of your team members, in terms of your office environment, in terms of the cases that you're going to get, the children, the families that you're going to work with? What are your expectations about that? Because even if you think, oh, I don't have any expectations, you probably do. An expectation is a thought about what might happen. So you might have a thought that, you know, you're only going to be working with teenagers, or you might have a thought that you are going to get shouted at every single day. That's an expectation. Write that down so you can then be mindful of that expectation and think about what you can do to counteract that, and how you're going to be able to share that expectation with the people that are supervising you. The final bit I'm going to talk about is navigating confidence battles. This comes up in just probably once a day from people who send me messages, and it's, you know, there's so many worries and fears that you have around confidence, or feelings that you have around confidence. And it's really important to unpick the idea of imposter syndrome. Lauren Curry, who I love, who if you don't follow, I can give you all the details, is actually doing another huge talk about this tonight on her channel. But the danger with imposter syndrome, well, we'll start with why we use imposter syndrome. It's helpful because it can sometimes be a way of describing our experience. It can be a name for that feeling of inadequacy that we get when we think we're not very good, or we're not good enough. But the danger of that is that it becomes not an excuse, but it becomes all that there is. So we can be this throwaway comment of, oh, that's my imposter syndrome, or I'm feeling imposter syndrome, full stop. And we don't then go on to unpick it. And quite often, and there can be lots of different takes around imposter syndrome. And, you know, I think most of us are women, or identifying as women. There's lots of different takes in terms of a feminist perspective of imposter syndrome, what that means. But where I focus on this for ASYEs is that often imposter syndrome is just about gaps in your knowledge. And although that sounds really simple, quite often we become so consumed with this idea of imposter syndrome, of I'm not good enough, that we don't take the time to break down, well, where is this coming from? And if it is around a gap in knowledge, around skills or practice, then you can work on those things, and that will increase your confidence. So there are practical, tangible things that you can do. But again, much like your expectations, you have to go backwards and kind of unpick what that is. So if there are any situations where you feel imposter syndrome, we can put it in inverted commas, comes up, start to break it down. Okay, what do I need to know? Where are the gaps in my knowledge? And then how can I get that information? So if it is around, it might be around home visits, it might be around having conversations with people, it might be around being on the phone, it might be chairing meetings, it might be writing case notes, writing minutes of meetings, undertaking assessments, going to court. And it might be all of those things. And if it's all of those things, write all of those things down as well, because then you can take it step by step. Okay, well, which part of the home visit is the most stressful for me? Is it knocking on the door? Is it having to share information? Is it having to ask questions? Once you've broken it down into those smaller steps, it's far easier for you to be able to work on. So rather than kind of seeing confidence and imposter syndrome are these sort of giant mountains that you can't get over, it's about breaking them down into smaller steps, and not letting yourself get away with just saying, oh, it's just imposter syndrome. You know, being active and saying, no, I'm not going to use that anymore, because it's not about inadequacy. It's not about not being good enough. Sometimes it's just about, well, I don't know this thing, and you only know what you know. So hopefully been as succinct as possible, because I didn't want to keep you for a whole hour. But these are starting points. Like I said, we've barely scratched the surface, but in terms of the things that maybe brought you into this training, into this conversation, when you were thinking about dealing with your fears, when anxiety is coming up for you, start with the information that you're consuming, because you will be surprised about the impact that that is having on your perception. When it comes to managing expectations, start with the self-awareness of your expectations versus your experience, or what you think your experience is going to be. And when you are navigating those confidence battles, allow yourself to go one step beyond this idea of imposter syndrome and really break it down into step-by-steps, because that is how you are going to improve your confidence, because it will be by taking action and looking at very practical, very tangible things. So that was probably a lot to take in. I hope by thinking about your, why you came here, you've been able to find some focus in what I've talked about. Remembering that we all have to start somewhere. Remembering that mindset is so, so important and will often be the thing that will wobble the most. Remembering that once you've done all those things, once you've been able to break down your expectations, once you've been able to strip back anything negative that you're consuming, remembering that when you take the time to just look at the skills that you need to build and how you're going to do that, you will feel more relaxed and you will feel more capable. So just invite you again to just take another deep breath. Think about something positive that's happened for you today or this week. If anything else comes up, you can just say hello to that thought and then let it go again. And then think about something that you're looking forward to. Maybe it's something that you're looking forward to when you do start in social work. It's okay for us to look for positive things. It doesn't mean we ignore anything else that's happening. It just means we allow ourselves to shift focus. And just enjoy a little minute of calm. If you've got your eyes closed, try not to fall asleep. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to stop recording so we can have some time for questions. If you want to ask but you don't want to say it out loud, then you can put anything in the chat box. If you want to share anything, if you have any reflections on what I've talked about, then please feel free to do so.